something changed the moment Sean Diddy Combs stepped into that courthouse. It wasn't the designer suit, the rigid posture, or the ever-watchful presence of his elite legal team. No, this wasn't the Diddy the world had known, the mogul, the media mastermind, the music industry kingmaker. This was a man unraveling in real time, forced to confront the very thing that once seemed impossible: accountability. For decades, Combs existed in rarefied air, untouchable, undefeated, unstoppable. He wasn't just a celebrity, he was a cultural force, a symbol of success. A man who redefined what it meant to be powerful, rich, and black in America. From chart-topping albums to record-breaking vodka deals to fashion lines to private jets and extravagant parties, Diddy built an empire fueled by ambition and cemented by control. He didn't just move through the entertainment world, he dominated it, but beneath the glitz, rumors always lingered, whispers of abuse, manipulation, fear. Stories from former employees, chilling allegations from ex-partners, civil lawsuits that vanished as quickly as they appeared, and an eerie pattern that until recently never quite cracked the public's devotion to the myth of Diddy. Until now, in 2023, the dam finally broke. Cassie Ventura's bombshell lawsuit filed, and then swiftly settled, cracked open a Pandora's box. It was no longer just about one allegation. It became a cascade. Suddenly everyone was looking closer. Survivors spoke, investigators dug deeper, federal agents acted, homes were raided, evidence was seized, lawsuits piled up, the press circled. And for the first time in his career, Diddy was no longer the one controlling the narrative. Now in 2025, we find ourselves in a moment of history, not musical history, not cultural history, but legal and moral reckoning. Sean Combs has returned to court not for a Grammy or a red carpet celebration, but for a pre-sentencing hearing that could determine the rest of his life. It's not hyperbole. It's fact, and the stakes could not be higher. This isn't just another court date. This isn't procedural. This is the U.S. government preparing to tell a judge on the record under oath that Sean Combs deserves the maximum possible sentence for his alleged role in a sprawling criminal enterprise built on coercion, abuse, and racketeering. Even without a conviction on all charges, the evidence has mounted. The testimonies are damning. The cultural tide has turned. So what really happened in that courtroom, from the sealed documents entered into evidence to the explosive new video played behind closed doors to the shocking silence from Combs himself? Today's hearing wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a seismic event. It marked the day the facade cracked wide open. It marked the day the bad boy for life became a cautionary tale of unchecked power, moral decay, and the slow but unrelenting pursuit of justice. The court heard from survivors, people who had waited years, some even decades, to speak. People who had been silenced, dismissed, paid off, threatened, or simply ignored by a system that didn't want to believe their stories could possibly be true about him. And yet there they were, trembling but defiant, describing in vivid detail the pain they carried from what they claim were Combs' calculated actions committed behind closed doors, masked by luxury, hidden beneath layers of public charm and billion-dollar branding. Prosecutors didn't just argue for punishment, they built a case for who Diddy really was behind the fame. They painted a picture of a man obsessed with control, a man who weaponized his wealth, a man who surrounded himself with enablers and insulated himself with lawyers, contracts, and fear. They argued that his crimes weren't just physical, they were systemic, that this wasn't about a moment or a misunderstanding, it was about a pattern. And perhaps the most chilling moment of the day, when the judge turned directly to Diddy and asked him if he had anything to say, anything at all. And he said nothing, not even a denial, not even a plea, just silence. That silence rang louder than any verdict. Outside, the world was watching. Protesters demanded justice, fans clung to fading memories, journalists raced to report each leak, each motion, each whisper of what might come next. And on social media, the reckoning intensified. Gone were the tributes to his music. In their place, survivor hashtags, video breakdowns, legal dissections, and a growing awareness that Diddy wasn't just part of a cultural movement, he was part of a systemic failure to protect the vulnerable. This isn't about cancel culture, this isn't about revenge. This is about a long overdue confrontation with the reality of who we allow to rise, and what we allow them to get away with once they do. For too long, fame has acted as a force field. For too long, power has operated without oversight. And for too long, people like Sean Combs have used their public image to disguise private horrors. But not anymore, because this time there are receipts, there are sworn statements, there is federal interest, and there is public attention, fierce, relentless, and unyielding. The walls are closing in, and no amount of PR or celebrity loyalty is enough to stop it. So as we head into the rest of this story, as sentencing nears, as new revelations emerge, and as more victims find the courage to speak, We must remember that this moment matters. It matters because it shows that even the most iconic, the most legendary, the most mythologized can still be held accountable. It matters because it tells every survivor who was ever silenced, we hear you now. And most of all, it matters because it's not just about the fall of Diddy. It's about the rise of truth. This is the beginning of the end of an era. Not just his era, but an era of unchecked celebrity power that allowed men like him to thrive no matter the cost. That era is collapsing, and this courtroom may be the first place it truly begins to burn. The courtroom was thick with tension. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the air outside buzzed with reporters, legal analysts, and a public ravenous for any glimpse of Sean Diddy Combs. After months of explosive revelations, raids, and disturbing footage leaked online, Diddy was back not for a trial but for a crucial pre-sentencing hearing. The stakes nothing less than his future. And the mood in that federal courthouse could only be described as chilling. Flanked by his high-powered legal team, Diddy walked into court dressed in muted tones. Gone were the designer sunglasses, the flamboyant style, the confident smirk. In their place was a man who looked aged by the process, gaunt, rigid, exhausted. And perhaps for the first time visibly afraid. This wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about freedom. The hearing was scheduled to determine the scope of sentencing recommendations from the prosecution. Though a full sentencing date had not yet been announced, today's session was critical. It would set the tone. It would lay the groundwork for what the Department of Justice intends to argue is the appropriate punishment for the alleged racketeering, trafficking, and abuse networks. The music mogul is accused of orchestrating. The judge opened proceedings with a sobering reminder: this court is not here to try this case in the public eye. We are here to address legal arguments, evidence, and procedures. Still, even he couldn't ignore the media circus outside the courthouse walls. Protesters gathered, survivors held signs, and curious onlookers crowded the steps. Some shouted support, most called for justice. Prosecutors began with a blistering summary. They reiterated that while a jury had delivered partial verdicts on several charges, including conspiracy and obstruction, other charges had resulted in a deadlock. But that didn't stop them from laying out again what they called a decade-long web of intimidation, coercion, and criminal enterprise. They described Diddy not just as a participant but as a ringleader, someone who abused power, money, and influence to exploit others. One of the key revelations: prosecutors had secured new testimony from a former associate who had worked with Combs in the early 2000s. Though not named publicly, the witness provided fresh accounts of how women were allegedly passed around like merchandise, sometimes under the influence, sometimes coerced with threats. Prosecutors said this testimony, while not part of the original indictment, demonstrated a clear pattern of behavior that should be considered in sentencing recommendations. The defense was predictably incensed. Diddy's lead attorney, Malcolm Brewster, called the government's argument a smear campaign rooted in gossip and sensationalism. He argued that the inclusion of new testimony at this stage, particularly from witnesses who had not been cross-examined at trial, was legally questionable and prejudicial. But the judge pushed back. He reminded the defense that sentencing hearings, unlike trials, have broader evidentiary standards. Victim impact statements, allegations, and prior behavior, even those not leading to convictions, could be weighed. That single clarification set the courtroom murmuring. And just when things couldn't get more intense, prosecutors played a never-before-seen video clip. While its contents were not broadcast, multiple sources confirmed the footage showed a disturbing physical altercation in what appeared to be a hotel hallway. Though blurry and time-stamped nearly 15 years ago, the man in the video bore an unmistakable resemblance to Combs. The woman, unnamed, could be seen backing away, shielding herself. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge ordered the video be entered under seal, but it was too late. Word had already leaked to the press by recess. Online hashtags began trending immediately. Hashtag Diddy Court, hashtag Justice for Survivors, hashtag Hotel Tape. The clip, short and silent, would dominate social media for the next 72 hours. Meanwhile, Diddy sat stoic, no reaction, no emotion. It was as though he knew the avalanche was coming and had simply stopped resisting it. The next bombshell came not from a prosecutor, but from a legal analyst sitting in the gallery, someone who had represented other high-profile entertainers. She tweeted mid-hearing that the prosecution's strategy indicated they were aiming for a maximum sentencing window, not just because of the nature of the crimes, but because of the pattern, the repeated accusations, the scope of influence, and most of all, Diddy's refusal to show contrition. And that's where it got personal. The judge turned to Diddy and asked a simple question: is there anything you'd like to say, Mr. Combs, regarding the allegations presented? Diddy stood, cleared his throat, And then in one of the most surreal moments of his decades-long public life simply said no, Your Honor, not at this time, a gasp, a pause, not even a denial, just a refusal. What followed were victim impact statements, from for individuals to women to men who had previously filed civil suits or affidavits in the broader investigation. Though their voices cracked, their words were clear. You destroyed my confidence, my livelihood, and my body, one woman said. But you will not destroy my voice. Another, a former dancer who said he was assaulted during a 2007 tour, choked up. People thought I was lying. But now they know, and now I know I wasn't alone. Their statements were not for show. Under federal law, such testimonies can influence sentencing, especially in racketeering and trafficking cases. The judge listened carefully, so did the jury of the public. The defense pushed back hard. Brewster accused the DOJ of staging a media execution and emphasized that Combs had not been convicted of many of the most serious allegations. This court should not be in the business of sentencing a man based on headlines, he argued. But the prosecution came prepared. They entered nearly 1,500 pages of sealed documents, including FBI interview transcripts, financial records allegedly showing hush money payments, and travel logs correlating with alleged events. It was overwhelming. And yet in the midst of this legal tidal wave, Diddy's team made a risky move. They requested leniency based on what they described as long-standing charitable contributions, mentorship programs, and community uplift. They even brought in a representative from one of Combs' philanthropic ventures to testify on his behalf. It fell flat. The judge acknowledged the testimony but reminded the court philanthropy does not absolve exploitation. And with that, the final statement was made. As court adjourned, the judge gave both sides 2 weeks to submit final sentencing briefs. A sentencing date would be announced soon, and by the looks of it, Diddy's freedom could hang by a thread. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. Journalists swarmed. Protesters shouted. Diddy's SUV pulled away behind tinted windows as camera flashes exploded. Somewhere inside, the music mogul, once untouchable, once beloved, sat in silence. Online, the reaction was instant and volcanic. Fans were divided. Some still held onto the legacy of bad boy records of Biggie, of Harlem's favorite son. Others saw only a predator cloaked in luxury. Public opinion was fractured, but the direction was unmistakable. The age of celebrity impunity was cracking. Legal experts debated nonstop. Could new testimony during sentencing really influence the outcome that much? Was the inclusion of sealed video a violation of due process? And above all, would this hearing tip the scales toward the maximum penalty? The consensus, yes, and quickly. As the court prepares for its final decision, the nation waits. Diddy's empire has already begun to crumble. Brands have pulled out. Collaborations have gone silent. And insiders whisper that even former friends, including some of the biggest names in hip-hop, are distancing themselves. But this isn't just about Diddy, it's about a culture that protected him, a system that enabled silence, and a reckoning that, no matter how slow, may finally be catching up. The pre-sentencing hearing didn't end with a bang, but it was louder than anything that had come before. Because for the first time, Diddy didn't just face accusations, he faced consequence. And when that final sentencing order comes down, the echoes of this hearing will ring through hip-hop history forever. The courtroom doors may have closed for the day, but the consequences of what happened inside will ripple far beyond the walls of federal justice. Sean Diddy Combs, once a titan of music, fashion, nightlife, and culture, now stands on the very edge of a cliff he never imagined he'd approach. What began as whispers, anonymous lawsuits, social media accusations have remembered. Stories of excess and abuse has now materialized into a judicial reality. That's no longer just public spectacle, it's punishment in motion. In the wake of this pre-sentencing hearing, the message is clear: no amount of celebrity money, nostalgia, or carefully curated image can permanently insulate someone from accountability. Not anymore. Not in an era where the court of public opinion can amplify the voices of victims louder than a record label ever amplified a hit single. Not in a world where footage, documents, and testimony can shatter myths of invincibility with brutal clarity. And yet this moment is not just about Diddy. It's not just about one man's fall from grace. It's about the house of mirrors surrounding him, the people, the institutions, the media outlets, and even the fans who enabled the illusion for decades. It's about the unchecked power that comes with fame and the willingness of an entire industry to look away, to protect itself, to ignore the signs when the person in question is too profitable, too iconic, or simply too powerful to be questioned. As Diddy sat silent in that courtroom, his refusal to speak spoke volumes. No apology, no denial, no statement of reflection or remorse. That silence wasn't just chilling, it was damning. Because in a moment when he had the opportunity to address the pain, the allegations, the trauma, and the mountain of evidence. He chose instead to say nothing. Whether that was a legal tactic or an emotional defense mechanism, the impact was the same. The survivors filled the void with their own voices, and the public listened. The victim impact statements delivered during the hearing weren't abstract. They weren't performative, they were raw, detailed, and courageous. For every fan who once danced to a Diddy beat or quoted a Puff Daddy lyric, those statements created a moral crossroads. How do we reconcile the music with the man, the brand with the broken lives, the entertainment with the exploitation? And let's not forget, this isn't over. The prosecution has made it clear that it's pushing for the maximum possible sentence, citing not just the evidence at trial but an entire pattern of behavior spanning to decades. New witnesses, new documents, and new video footage are continuing to emerge. The investigations aren't slowing down, they're expanding. Even as sentencing looms, more lawsuits are reportedly in the pipeline. There are whispers of collaborators flipping, associates talking, more survivors preparing to come forward. If Diddy thought this hearing would be the final chapter, he was wrong. It may only be the prelude to a broader reckoning. Behind the scenes, his empire is dissolving rapidly. Ciroc, Revolt, Sean John, all brands that once bore his name, his influence, his swagger, are either distancing themselves or collapsing under the weight of association. Endorsement deals have gone cold, business partners have vanished. Some of his oldest friends in the industry have gone radio silent. What was once a tightly controlled media empire has now become a crisis PR battlefield. And the leaks are flooding in faster than the spin machines can contain them. For those who have spent years trying to be heard, the women who filed lawsuits and were dismissed as opportunists, the former employees who warned of toxic environments, the artists who said they were chewed up and discarded, this moment is both vindicating and tragic. Vindicating because the world is finally paying attention. Tragic because it took so long and because the damage is already done. And for the younger generation watching this unfold, it's a grim but necessary education. The message being sent now is not just about Diddy's guilt or innocence in specific charges. It's about a cultural turning point, that success does not mean invulnerability, that the story behind the curtain can matter just as much as the show on stage, that even the biggest names can fall, and when they do, the sound it makes isn't music. It's the collective roar of truth finally being heard. The legal system, often accused of moving slowly or favoring the rich and powerful, has taken a different tone here. The judge's insistence on weighing all available evidence, the inclusion of sealed documents and unseen video, the emotional gravity of survivor testimonies, all of it indicates that the court is not interested in protecting celebrity status, it is interested in the law and, more importantly, in justice. Still, there are no guarantees. The sentencing phase is complex. The legal team representing Combs will fight tooth and nail to mitigate his punishment, likely citing community contributions, mental health issues, or technicalities in the prosecution's case. But even if the sentence doesn't reach the maximum, the real sentence has already begun. Public trust has evaporated, legacy has been poisoned, and the power Diddy once wielded in boardroom, studios, and even backroom negotiations is slipping through his fingers. In many ways, this story is a symbol of the larger cultural shift we are witnessing. From Hollywood to hip-hop, from boardrooms to blockbuster stars, the old rules are dying. Survivors are speaking. Institutions are being questioned. Legacies are being rewritten not by PR firms but by truth-tellers, journalists, and courtroom revelations. So where does that leave Sean Diddy Combs right now? He's a man waiting to be sentenced, not just by the court but by history. His story is no longer solely about musical genius or business acumen. It is about accountability, about harm, about silence in the face of pain. And whatever the final sentence says on paper, the public has already started to write its own verdict. Justice, especially when delayed, rarely feels whole. It doesn't undo the damage or erase the trauma. But it matters. It matters because it signals a new era. One in which even the most powerful can be called to account. One in which no one, no matter how rich, how famous, or how influential, is beyond the reach of consequence. The empire is crumbling. The mask has fallen. The truth is being heard. And now we wait for the gavel to fall one last time.